You've probably heard the story of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, right? This incredible beacon of black prosperity that was tragically burned to the ground in 1921. But what if I told you that fire was only the first destruction? In this explainer, we're going to uncover the second, much quieter demolition, the story of how a community that rose from the ashes was literally paved over.
This quote right here really gets to the heart of our story, this idea of moral amnesia. It's a warning, It tells us that when we forget our history, the injustices don't just vanish. Nope, they just find new weapons.
So that's the big question we're tackling. We know about the fire, the violence, the horror of 1921. That's been documented. But what about that second erasure? The one that happened decades later, not with a bang, but with bulldozers and bureaucracy. This is the story of how a community was destroyed twice.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, a tale of two destructions. We're going to uncover the full story of how Greenwood was erased, and you'll see how an act of pure, overt violence was later followed by an act of policy and, well, concrete.
This timeline tells such a powerful story. So 1906, Greenwood is founded. 1921, the horrific massacre. But here's the part that often gets skipped. By the 1940s, against all odds, the community had rebuilt itself. I mean, the resilience is just breathtaking. And then, bam, the 1960s hit, and the federal government decides to route Interstate 244 right through the heart of the reborn Greenwood, shattering it all over again.
So yeah, the weapons changed, but the target stayed the same. This time around, it wasn't mobs with firebombs. It was federal policies, things with sterile names like urban renewal, eminent domain, and highway planning. But the result? It was exactly the same, the displacement and destruction of a thriving black community.
Okay, Section 2, the Restoration Corridor. Now we're going to reveal a kind of hidden map of interconnected communities. Because to really get the scale of this loss, you have to understand that Greenwood wasn't an island. It was the anchor of a much, much bigger ecosystem. And look at this. Once you start looking west from Tulsa, you see a clear pattern. South Haven, Beaufort Colony, Little Africa, each one was a self-reliant community with its own anchor, a church, a school, you name it. And each one was systematically dismantled with a different tool from that urban renewal playbook. These were not a series of unfortunate accidents. This was a strategy.
And this is exactly why it all matters so much. These places weren't just towns. They were declarations of independence. They were physical symbols of a commitment to self-governance and land ownership. As one of our sources puts it so powerfully, they were sigils against forgetting, living, breathing monuments meant to build a new future while honoring a deep, deep past.
Okay, on to Section 3, a treaty for repair. So, if the problem was systemic destruction, it only makes sense that the solution has to be systemic repair, right? And that's what brings us to this modern proposal for a treaty for repair.
Now, the core idea here is a formal binding treaty. And that word, treaty, is chosen very intentionally. It completely reframes the relationship. This isn't about charity. It's about a co-equal partnership aimed squarely at justice. It's a framework for restoration, not revenge. So, this treaty is built on three main pillars. First, it starts with local renewal, basically investing directly back into the very communities that were harmed. Then, it zooms out to global connectivity, using today's technology to rebuild bridges across the entire African diaspora. And finally, it gets to the root of the problem with self-governance, restoring the autonomy that was so deliberately stripped away. So, Section 4, from Tulsa to the world. Now, this whole treaty thing might sound a little abstract, but the proposal is actually a very concrete blueprint for action. It starts right back in Tulsa and is designed to scale globally.
The whole plan kicks off right back where our story began, in that restoration corridor. The idea is to designate this whole area as a pilot zone. Then you establish a reparative investment fund with money from public and private sources to directly support community-owned projects. We're talking about rebuilding wealth from the ground up.
And I love this breakdown because it shows how the vision is to systematically reverse the damage. Where highways cut communities apart, new digital bridges will connect them. Where land was seized by eminent domain, it'll be returned to community land trusts. It's really all about using the tools of restoration to undo the work of erasure, piece by piece.
And this vision doesn't stop at America's borders. It's global. The proposal actually calls for a specific digital bridge partnership with Guyana. Now, why Guyana? Well, it's a super strategic move, a plan for trade,
for technology transfer, for cultural exchange, all designed to meaningfully reconnect a diaspora that was torn apart centuries ago. And all of this leaves us with a pretty stark choice, doesn't it? The history is clear: first destruction by fire, then destruction by concrete. The proposal for repair is also crystal clear. So really, the final question isn't if the bill for this history will come due, but when and how it's going to be paid.